Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're a little light this week, but we still have a good broadcast for you. If you could, please hit the like button to like the stream and the subscribe button to subscribe to Tochnyi. It really helps spread the word about what we're doing to all the great people who want more accurate information about what's going on in Ukraine. We also have social media. We have Twitter and Blue Sky, so you guys can check us out there if you want any updates on some of our other projects. And finally, of course, we have our website, which has the most information of all. It has lots of articles published by researchers and people working hard who don't really have time to come on the stream, but they have time to do a lot of research and back-end stuff that appears on the website. So if you want interactive maps and other analysis and articles, it's a great place to go. Tochnyi.info. Also, we will be addressing any questions you guys have in the stream, so you can do any questions you have in the chat there. And also, if you're watching after the fact in the comments, we'll do our best to address what the audience is asking. So without any delay, I will go ahead and jump into the news. These are the main headlines as of July 6th, 2025. First up, we have operations. Major General Mikhail Gudkov, serving as Russia's deputy Navy chief, is taking an extended YouTube nap following a Ukrainian strike on a Russian military command site in Kursk Oblast near the Ukrainian border. Ukrainian forces targeted the forward command post of the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade in the village of Koronevo. The strike, reportedly involving 4 missiles, resulted in the death of over 10 Russian officers, including several high-ranking figures. Russia's Ministry of Defense acknowledged Gudkov's death, noting only that it occurred during active duty in a border region. Local government officials confirmed the general's passing and noted his habit of personally inspecting positions on the front lines despite his high rank. Gudkov previously commanded the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, which played a critical role at the 2022 siege of Mariupol. That campaign led to widespread destruction throughout the city and resulted in a significant number of civilian deaths. His actions during the operation were recognized at the highest levels of the Russian government, with President Vladimir Putin awarding him the title Hero of Russia and praising his conduct as exemplary. Gudkov is the 11th Russian general to die since the outset of the full-scale invasion in February of 2022. A strike involving unmanned aerial systems targeted the Aviation Training Center and adjacent airbase at Borosoglebsk, located in Russia's Voronezh region. The facility is responsible for pilot instruction and hands-on flight training for fighter aircraft and was reportedly hit during a nighttime operation. Video footage published by Astra captured the aftermath of the incident, which affected the grounds of the 209th Training Aviation Base, where Yak-130 advanced jet trainers are stationed. Thermal anomaly data from NASA's firm satellite monitoring system showed a sharp increase in surface temperature in the area around 3:30 a.m., indicating a major fire resulting from the strike. I know the OSINT guys say that that's not super reliable. You have to kind of use that data, the firm's data, in patterns, so I'm hoping there's more than that. This location has been a repeat target of similar operations. In August of 2024, drones struck the same military airfield, which is known to house various aircraft from the Russian aerospace forces, including Su-25s, 30s, 34s, and 35s. The current strike adds to a growing list of incidents aimed at degrading the operational capacity of this key site. The Aviation Training Center itself has previously come under drone attack. On June 2, 2025, drones struck the facility, resulting in the loss of 2 Russian servicemen, although initial Russian defense reports omitted this outcome. Earlier still, in April of 2024, 2 drones hit the training center roughly an hour apart in the early morning, with one impacting the 4th floor of the main building. Ukrainian Defense Intelligence later confirmed that a production workshop within the complex had been damaged in the incident. Strike drones targeted the VNIIR Progress Production Facility in Cheboksary, located in the Chuvash Republic, focusing specifically on a workshop involved in the manufacture of electronic components. The impact triggered a fire, according to the regional governor, and emergency services were mobilized. VNIIR Progress is a key enterprise under the ABS Electro-Industrial Group and plays a central role in producing electronic systems for Russian military platforms. Its product line includes the Kometa-type antennas and GNSS modules, which are compatible with satellite navigation systems like GLONASS, GPS, and Galileo. These components are extensively used in a wide range of military assets, including Shahed-type loitering munitions, Iskander-M and Caliber missile systems, and the UMPK precision guidance kits that enhance the effectiveness of unguided bombs. The facility also supplies advanced electrical equipment such as circuit breakers, relays, and contactless modules to the Russian Navy. Notably, some of this hardware is installed on the Yasen-M class nuclear submarines. The company also develops broader industrial systems, including the SCADA platforms, software-defined radios, and programmable electric drives for use in shipbuilding, energy infrastructure, and heavy industry. This latest strike is not the first incident involving the plant. In early June 2025, two AN-196 Lyuty-type drones carried out a similar operation, traveling nearly 1,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border to hit the facility at the specific coordinates. Following the attack, production at the affected building was suspended, with local authorities citing worker safety as the rationale. In the early hours of July 2nd, Ukrainian forces conducted a successful maritime drone strike on a high-value Russian air defense installation near the village of Mayak on Crimea's northwestern Tarkhanut Cape. The operation targeted a Nebo-M radar complex, a sophisticated system capable of detecting aerial and ballistic objects over a wide range, and it resulted in the destruction of its key components. This marked the first documented case of a Ukrainian naval drone deploying quadcopters mid-mission to carry out precision aerial attacks. Footage showed a quadcopter launching from the surface of a maritime drone and releasing munitions on target, a tactic not previously observed in Ukrainian operations. The strike reportedly disabled two radar arrays and their command module. While the specific unit behind the mission was not named, the presence of Special Operations Forces insignias suggests the potential involvement from Naval Spetsnaz, including the 73rd Naval Special Operations Center or the Special Operations Center South. According to Krymsky Veter, a Ukrainian military-linked channel, the drones were used as part of a broader electronic warfare strategy, reportedly operating on frequencies not effectively jammed by Russian systems. Russian mill bloggers reacted with visible frustration, suggesting failures in Russia's electronic defense layers and questioning the capability of the personnel responsible for intercepting drone incursions. On the night of July 3rd, Ukrainian forces launched a coordinated drone strike on the Energia facility in Yelets in Lipetsk Oblast, a major producer of missile and drone components. The attack triggered multiple explosions and a fire near the plant, according to the regional governor. Local sources and media channels reported a series of blasts that prompted the evacuation of nearby workshop personnel. No injuries were reported at the site. Ukrainian officials later confirmed the operation, stating that unmanned systems forces, in coordination with other military branches, executed the strike to disrupt Russia's military-industrial production. Energia has also been the target of repeated attacks, including several drone strikes in May of 2025. Its location is around 250 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. On the morning of July 1st, long-range drones operated by Ukraine's security services targeted the Kupol defense enterprise in Izhevsk, the Udmurt Republic, located more than 1,300 kilometers from the front lines. According to a source within the SBU, the drone successfully struck both the production and storage sites of the facility, which triggered a fire. The Kupol plant is a key asset within Russia's defense industrial base, manufacturing Tor and OSA short-range air defense systems, as well as Harpy-type unmanned combat aerial vehicles. The facility is under international sanctions due to its role in supporting the Russian military. The source stated that the operation was part of a broader campaign to dismantle production chains contributing to the Russian war machine. In response to the incident, flights from the Izhevsk airport were temporarily suspended by Russia's aviation authorities. Local residents noted a lack of air raid alerts and reported ongoing mobile internet disruptions, which reportedly have limited access to emergency communication channels such as Telegram. These conditions have hindered public awareness during the strike. An explosion in the Russian-occupied Luhansk area on July 3rd resulted in the loss of Manolis Pilavov, the longtime head of the city's occupation administration. The incident took place on the Tarasa Shevchenka Street in the center of the city, with initial reports indicating that an explosive device was planted in a trash bin and detonated as Pilavov passed by. The blast reportedly left 3 others injured. One of them is in serious condition. The location was near the Luhansk Regional Museum, which was hosting an exhibition related to Russian military operations. Russian state outlets, including TASS and RIA Novosti, confirmed Pilavov's death and circulated early details of the incident. While there has been no formal attribution of responsibility, speculation points to either a Ukrainian special operation or internal conflict among pro-Russian factions controlling the occupied territory. These guys don't usually last long. Ukrainian intelligence services, specifically the SBU and HUR, have previously carried out targeted actions against high-value figures in the occupied regions, though they typically refrain from publicly claiming responsibility. When such operations occur, official Ukrainian channels often limit themselves to vague confirmations or allow unofficial leaks to inform the press. Pilavov had a long trajectory in local politics. Before the 2014 Russian-backed seizure of the region, he held various posts within Luhansk's city government, including as deputy mayor and the head of the water utility. He served a brief stint as the president of the Zorya football club. His political affiliations tied him to the pro-Russian Party of Regions under former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. Following the occupation of Luhansk in 2014, Pilavov quickly aligned himself with the Russian-installed authorities. He was officially appointed to lead the so-called Luhansk city administration by the separatist leader Ihor Platinsky. Over the years, he received public recognition from both the Russian Federation and the self-declared Luhansk People's Republic for his loyalty to the occupation regime. He remained in this position until November of 2023. Ukrainian law enforcement had listed Pilavov as a wanted individual on charges related to undermining Ukraine's territorial integrity, attempting to forcibly alter the constitutional order, and leading an unlawful armed structure. His loss removes one of the most senior remaining collaborators from the early days of Russian control in eastern Ukraine. Man, Ukraine's been busy, huh? Up next, we have economy and aid. In another U.S. case of reverse aid, the U.S. Department of Defense has halted the transfer of several key weapon systems previously slated for Ukraine, citing concerns over domestic stockpile levels. The decision was made by Pentagon policy chief and cartoon dog conspiracy theorist Elbridge Colby following an internal review that flagged shortages in critical munitions, particularly artillery shells, precision-guided weapons, and air defense systems. This move comes at a time when Ukraine is experiencing record levels of Russian aerial assaults, including over 5,300 Shahed-type drone launches in 2025 alone. These suspended items reportedly include more than 24 Patriot interceptor missiles, over 24 Stinger systems, Hellfire missiles, guided artillery rounds, drones, and roughly 90 AIM air-to-air missiles used by Ukraine's F-16 fighters. The weapons were already staged in Poland and awaiting final transfer to Ukrainian forces. Although the suspension has not been publicly detailed by the Pentagon, the White House confirmed the decision after it was reported by Politico, framing it as part of a broader effort to prioritize U.S. defense readiness. In response, the Ukrainian president stated in his July 2nd address that Ukrainian and American officials are engaging in discussions to resolve the issue, particularly concerning critical air defense systems. Ukraine's defense ministry noted that no formal communication regarding the cancellations had been received, but requested immediate consultations with their U.S. counterparts. Ukraine's foreign ministry summoned the U.S. Charge d'Affaires, John Ginkel, to express concern and warned that any delay or ambiguity in support could embolden the Russian military to act further. I think this goes without saying, but our Colby's better. On July 4th, Ukraine and Denmark formalized a defense cooperation agreement that will allow Ukrainian arms manufacturers to establish production operations on Danish soil, according to the Strategic Industries Minister, Herman Smetanin. The agreement, signed in Copenhagen with Danish Industry Minister Morten Bodskov, marks a first in Ukraine's defense industry, the export of domestic defense technology for the purpose of manufacturing weapons abroad to be supplied directly back to the Ukrainian armed forces. This development builds on Denmark's earlier initiatives. In 2023, it became the first country to directly fund the production of weapons by Ukrainian defense firms. Now it becomes the first to host Ukrainian production infrastructure, providing a secure environment for scaling up manufacturing amid the ongoing invasion. Smetana described the agreement as a breakthrough in international defense collaboration for Ukraine, allowing the country to increase production capacity outside its borders while ensuring the uninterrupted delivery of equipment to frontline forces. It's actually a US-based company called SwiftBeat, and they aim to produce hundreds of thousands of drones for Ukraine during the year of 2025. Man, why can't more countries be like Denmark? On July 1st, Ukraine's state-owned Oshud Bank secured a legal victory in its long-running case against Russia at the Paris Court of Appeal, which held a 2018 arbitration ruling ordering Moscow to compensate the bank for losses sustained following the 2014 annexation of Crimea. The French court rejected Russia's attempt to overturn the decision and reinforced the tribunal's order for over $1.5 billion in damages, along with 300,000 euros in legal costs. This marks a significant milestone in Ukraine's broader legal campaign to hold Russia financially accountable for the seizure of assets and disruption of operations in Crimea. Oshud Bank becomes the first Ukrainian financial institution to successfully win such a case against the Russian Federation. Following the ruling, Oshud Bank officials emphasized that the judgment sets an important precedent for other Ukrainian entities seeking compensation through international courts. Rosa Tapanova, a member of the bank's supervisory board, called the decision a signal that legal efforts to address the economic consequences of the occupation have strong potential. The case originated from a 2018 arbitration tribunal decision, which found Russia liable for expropriating the bank's Crimean assets during the annexation. Since then, Oshud Bank has initiated efforts to recover the assets in multiple countries. Earlier this year, it seized over 87 million euros of Russian assets in France, part of an ongoing push to identify and claim Russian holdings abroad. Acknowledging that Russia is unlikely to comply with the judgment voluntarily, the deputy chairman Arsen Miliutin stated that the bank is prepared for a drawn-out legal campaign to recover the full amount, including accrued interest over time. Oshud Bank's leadership expressed confidence in their strategy and indicated that further enforcement actions are underway. Up next, we have international relations. Ukrainian President Zelensky has signed a decree initiating Ukraine's formal withdrawal from the 1997 Ottawa Convention, which prohibits the use, production, stockpiling, and transfer of anti-personnel landmines. The move aligns Ukraine with recent declarations by Poland and the Baltic states, which have also signaled their intent to exit the treaty amid heightened security concerns due to the full-scale invasion by Russia. Zelensky justified the decision by pointing to Russia's ongoing and widespread use of landmines, noting that Moscow never joined the convention and continues to deploy various types of anti-personnel mines across the battlefield. He framed the withdrawal as a response to the realities of war, accusing Russian forces of deliberately targeting life through indiscriminate means and asserting that Ukraine must match the evolving nature of the threat it faces. The Ottawa Convention, signed by more than 160 countries, was designed to mitigate long-term civilian harm by banning weapons that often remain active long after hostilities end. Ukraine joined the treaty in the late 1990s, but has increasingly faced operational limitations due to its obligations under the accord. Lawmaker Roman Kostenko, the Secretary of Ukraine's Parliamentary Defense Committee, stated that the decision reflects the demands of the current battlefield conditions and confirmed that the decree will now be reviewed by Parliament. On July 1st, President Zelensky ratified the agreement establishing the Special Tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine, a major legal milestone aimed at prosecuting Russia's top political and military leadership for initiating the full-scale invasion. The move follows the formal signing of the agreement between Ukraine and the Council of Europe on June 25th in Strasbourg, marking the culmination of over 3 years of international legal and diplomatic coordination. Zelensky urged Ukraine's parliament to prioritize the adoption of legislative amendments required for the country's full implementation of the tribunal agreement. He emphasized that the work to establish the tribunal must begin without delay and instructed both the Foreign Ministry and the Presidential Office to finalize a roadmap with international partners to launch the body. The tribunal is specifically designed to address the crime of aggression, the unlawful use of force by one state against another, which current international legal institutions such as the International Criminal Court are not equipped to prosecute in Ukraine's case due to jurisdictional constraints. Unlike war crimes or crimes against humanity, the crime of aggression requires a separate legal mechanism if neither the aggressor nor the victim state is a party to the ICC's relevant jurisdictional protocols. Russia is not a signatory to the Rome Statute and therefore cannot be tried for aggression through the International Criminal Court. Zelensky reiterated that the tribunal would hold Russian leadership accountable for launching and directing the invasion. He called the process a matter of global importance, asserting that the inevitability of punishment for aggression is essential to maintaining international peace and security. In his address to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe on June 25th, Zelensky acknowledged the body's foundational role in promoting the tribunal. He noted that the idea for the tribunal had originated within PACE and that it had since gained support across Europe and among Ukraine's broader international partners. Russia has officially recognized the Taliban government in Afghanistan, according to a statement released by its foreign ministry via the state-run news agency TASS. This recognition includes the symbolic gesture of raising the Taliban flag over the Afghan embassy in Moscow, the first time the group's flag has flown there since it took control of Afghanistan in 2021. The decision was approved by the Russian President Vladimir Putin following a proposal from the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Russia's ambassador to Afghanistan, Dmitry Zhirnov, stated that the move reflects Moscow's intent to develop a, quote, full-fledged partnership with the Taliban-led government. This recognition makes Russia the first country to formally acknowledge the Taliban administration since the group returned to power. Despite previously designating the Taliban as a terrorist organization in 2003, Russia has increasingly engaged with the group through regular diplomatic contacts and hosted Taliban officials in Moscow in recent years. The shift in policy has been facilitated by legislative changes within Russia. In December of 2024, the State Duma passed a law permitting entities to be removed from the national list of banned terrorist organizations through court decisions. President Putin signed the bill shortly afterward. In March of 2025, Russia's Prosecutor General petitioned the Supreme Court to lift the ban on the Taliban's activities in Russia, and the request was approved the following month. Andrei Badalov, the vice president of the Russian state-owned oil pipeline operator Transneft, died after falling from the window of his Moscow apartment, according to multiple Russian media outlets. Initial reports came from Telegram channels such as Baza and Mash, both known for law enforcement connections, and were later confirmed by state-run agencies like TASS and Kommersant. Law enforcement officials told TASS that the preliminary assessment points to him taking his own life. However, Russia's investigative committee has launched an inquiry to determine whether there is cause to pursue a criminal investigation, either for incitement, foul play, or to close the case entirely if no criminal activity is found. Badalov had served as a vice president at Transneft since 2021. This incident adds to a growing list of senior figures in Russian state-linked sectors who have lost their lives under unclear or suspicious circumstances since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The investigation remains open pending further findings. Former Russian Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov has been sentenced to 13 years in prison by a Moscow court on corruption charges, making it one of the most severe penalties ever handed to a senior Russian official. Ivanov, who was arrested in April of 2024, had overseen military construction projects since his appointment in 2016. His case is part of a broader anti-corruption campaign within Russia's defense ministry that has resulted in the arrest of multiple high-ranking officials. Initially charged with bribery, the scope of the allegations against Ivanov expanded significantly during the investigation. Prosecutors ultimately accused him of embezzling 4.1 billion rubles, or around $50 million through foreign bank transfers, and misappropriating an additional 216 million rubles, or about $2.7 million, during the purchase of 2 ferries intended for a transport route between mainland Russia and occupied Crimea. In addition to his prison sentence, the Moscow City Court imposed a 100 million ruble fine, or about $1 million fine, and ordered the revocation of his state honors. Court proceedings had been closed to the public since March of 2025, and prosecutors had initially sought a 14.5-year sentence. Ivanov is often referred to in Russian media as the, quote, glamorous general, and was widely seen as a close associate of the former defense minister Sergei Shoigu, who was dismissed in May of 2024 and reassigned to the head of Russia's Security Council. Ivanov's downfall represents the highest level arrest within the military establishment since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. He was previously listed among the wealthiest figures in Russia's security sector. A 2018 Forbes Russia report estimated his family's assets at nearly 137 rubles, or $1.5 million. Ivanov has been under U.S. and EU sanctions since 2022 due to his role in overseeing infrastructure projects tied to Russia's military expansion. Alongside Ivanov, the court also sentenced Anton Filatov, the former head of the Defense Ministry's logistics subsidiary, to 12.5 years in prison. And last item for me this week. An international United Nations analysis has concluded that Russia was responsible for the July 2022 explosion at the Olenivka prison facility, in which over 50 Ukrainian prisoners of war lost their lives. Ukrainian Ombudsman Dmytro Lubinets publicly disclosed the findings on June 30th, citing a report by the Center for Human Rights in Armed Conflict. The investigation states that the internal UN assessment found that the Russian Federation deliberately planned and executed the attack. The UN has not officially released or acknowledged this internal conclusion. However, the findings highlight Russia's role in orchestrating the explosion, which targeted the POWs, specifically members of the Azov Regiment, shortly before they were due for a prisoner exchange. According to Kyiv, these individuals had been moved days in advance to the exact section of the prison that was destroyed in the blast. The UN's own reporting previously indicated that Russian authorities obstructed efforts to conduct an independent investigation. This included denying access to international observers and tampering with evidence at the scene. The fact-finding mission originally formed to investigate the incident was later disbanded due to the lack of security guarantees and the mission's refusal to consider evidence provided by Ukraine. Lubinets emphasized that the investigation outlines the specific weapons and munitions the Russian forces used in the attack and the details of how the operation was planned and implemented. The incident is seen as part of a broader pattern of Russia's systemic violations of international humanitarian law, particularly in its treatment of prisoners of war. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We will now move to the next segment. Okay, thanks, Me. Well, up next, we're going to have Stanimir. If you have anything that you wanted to talk about this week in regards to the Russian economy, I'm sure that the audience would like to hear.
Yeah, I have several things. Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
So first we have a bit of farming news. Russia's harvest continues to be damaged by bad weather. So initially it was hit by an early warmth followed by a late cold snap, which destroyed a lot of the berries and fruits. And what now happened was a series of weeks where they had drought, and they were then followed by hailstorms and heavy rains due to a cyclone that's over the European part of Russia, so Western Russia and Southwestern Russia. And this, if it continues and the soil doesn't dry up, it may destroy even large chunks of their wheat harvest this year. What also we saw this week is that some Russian metallurgical plants are starting to adopt a 4-day working week because they don't have enough production, they don't have enough demand for their production. It also is going to lower their costs because currently, at least for the electrometallurgical plants, when they stop working for 1 day in the week, they're not incurring additional costs for not operating their furnaces. Then we saw that the Russian manufacturing PMI dropped to 47.5 points. That means a serious contraction in June. And also we saw that for the first time in, I think, several months, we also had the services PMI drop to 49.2 points again, showcasing a contraction of services activities. Before that, in May, the manufacturing PMI was at 50.2 points, so a slight expansion of output, and the services PMI in May was at 52.2 points. Russian car sales for the first half of the year dropped 26%. LCV sales were down 90%. Truck sales are down 54%, and bus sales are down also 54%. And the Russian Ministry of Industry and Trade said that if this continues, the Russian automotive industry might drop by 40% by the end of 2025. Their plan for revitalizing this, at least for the passenger cars, is introducing new preferential loans for families to buy cars. But this is going to eat away at the Russian budget because the budget has to subsidize the difference between the market rate and the preferential rate that these loans are being given out. Sorry, I'm used to preferential loans being just mortgages so far. So finally, we have the loading on the Russian railways for H1 dropped by 7.6% compared to 2024. Russian railway traffic has been consistently dropping during the war, at least during the more intensive part of the war. The reason for the drop is that the scrap metal transportation fell down by 31.8%, ferrous metal transportation fell down by 25.8%, and construction supplies fell down by 19.7%. That is for domestic transport. For exports, we saw that with Russian wheat losing its compatibility outside of Russia due to the high ruble, Russian grain exports by rail also fell down by 57.1%. In the banking sector, Sberbank is going to report its highest dividends for 2024. It had a record profit and is going to pay 786.9 billion rubles in profits for 2024 in dividends in 2024. Also, according to Sberbank's CEO Gref, a decrease of the interest rate by 1 or 2% is insufficient at the next meeting of the central bank, which is at the end of July. So what he's hoping is for the Russian central bank to bring down the interest rate to 14% to stimulate investment in the economy, as he's seeing investment projects just dry out completely when it comes to their customers. In terms of commodities, Russian scrap metal producers are asking for an abolishment of the quota for exporting scrap, because currently domestic demand is going to drop by over 2 million tons. So they want to be able to export at least half of that abroad to keep their profits up. However, electrometallurgical plants are asking for the Russian state to not do that, because that will make their steel input increasingly more expensive, and also it will be less competitive on the world market with more Russian scrap being available at a lower price for global markets to buy. Also, Russian exports to China revitalized in terms of aluminium. It increased by 56% to reach 1 million tons in May. Copper exports were up 66%, and nickel exports were up over 100%. When it comes to coal, Russian CEOs of coal companies are already saying that coal's prices have fallen as much as they can. At this point, there's nowhere to further decrease coal prices at the coal miners, because they're operating at cost currently for thermal coal. So Russian production of coal for January to May 2025 decreased only slightly by 1 million tons, but it's going to decrease probably a lot more by the end of the year. And Russian ports are sitting on something like 50 million tons of unexported coal. This is 25% higher than in 2024, the same period. For this year, the Russian coal industry is going to record probably a 300 to 350 billion rubles in terms of a loss. For the entirety of 2024, the loss was only 112 billion rubles, and for the first 5 months of 2025, they've already surpassed that loss in terms of losses for coal companies. Also, Russian coal companies are taking out a lot more debt. So currently the coal mining industry has 1.2 trillion rubles in debt, and this is expensive debt. And by the end of 2025, it's going to reach 1.4 trillion rubles in debt. When it comes to gas and oil, we saw that gasoline this week and in the previous month rose by 12% for AI 92 and AI 95 gasoline. This is due to the increased exports by large Russian producers of gasoline. This is something they're allowed. The smaller producers and the traders aren't allowed, but the larger producers are allowed. We're not still at the peak of gasoline prices on the wholesale market, which was in September 2024. But if this continues and Russian companies don't redirect more supplies to the domestic market, they're going to see the wholesale price rise even further and maybe beat that peak in 2024. Gazprom pipeline exports to Europe dropped 47% in H1 2025 to only 8.33 billion cubic meters, and Russian LNG exports as a whole to Europe in H1 dropped by 13%. The final bit on the oil and gas news is that Russia is planning to introduce 2 indexations of gas prices per year by 10%. This is to save the companies that can currently not export as much as they wish to Europe or to other destinations. So this will cost Russian industrial companies at least 85 billion rubles a year more, and Russian power generating companies are also asking for a 2 times per year increase in prices if this is happening for gas prices. In terms of the construction market, Russian investment in commercial real estate and land plots dropped by 38% in H1 of 2025 to 290 billion rubles. Investments in offices and office buildings is down 33%, In warehouses, it's down 45%, and in retail space, it's down 22%. So soon we're probably going to see that the only profitable portion of the Russian construction market is building luxury apartments. When it comes to interesting data points from this week, sales of Russian domestically produced agricultural equipment on the Russian market for the first 5 months of the year were down 42.8% to just 62.7 billion rubles. This is not expected to recover for the next 2 or 3 years, as Russian farmers are really suffering due to the bad weather and the high price of the ruble and the inability to export their goods outside of Russia easily. Also, according to a piece in Izvestia, the Russian MS-21 airliner that is currently being certified is now 65% more expensive than it was in 2023. The yields 114.30 and the Baikal light transport airplane are also up 45 to 70% more in price than they were in 2023. So it's a question that if Russia actually buys big numbers of these planes, if the budget is going to be there to actually sustain those purchases and even replace the existing Western fleet. When it comes to inflation and debt this week, we saw that Russian inflation for the week of 24th to 30th of June was 0.07%. That is a high number for the last month, but it's relatively low for 2025. Inflation for June was only 0.19%, and for the year so far, 3.76%. So for Russia's debt selling initiative, this week, they managed to sell 70.724 billion rubles at a yield of 14.928%. And they had a second auction where they sold 29.4 billion rubles at a yield of 14.32%. This is the lowest yield we've seen this far in 2025, and it's continuing to drop down due to the lower interest rate and the better faith in the Russian ruble. And I think that's it for me for this week.
Thank you, Stanimir. I think across the board it was bad news, except you mentioned one thing, which was increased like raw metal exports to China. Is there any other information about that? Like, is that any kind of escape hatch for them? Can they scale that up, or is it just a little minor blip?
It's good for the companies that export those types of metals, but it's a blip on the overall economy. The collapse of the automotive industry is currently ongoing, and they don't have any way to revitalize truck sales or sales of buses. And that means companies like Ural, Kamaz, UAZ, Gaz are going to have serious issues keeping their sales and keeping people employed. They're already having a lot of debt, and they're currently recording only losses, so that debt burden is going to only increase. For example, Lada doesn't even, Avtovaz, that is the parent company of Lada, doesn't even release financial statistics, so we don't know how bad the situation is there. We only know that they were sitting on 120 billion rubles of debt last year, the last time they reported. And this is only growing, and they're not very profitable this year.
Gotcha. And it sounded like China's aluminum imports and stuff were up quite a bit. Like, do we know why that is? Did they change countries they're importing it from, or something else?
I think it was more of a monthly peak in terms of a backlog of low imports for a while.
Okay. Well, there you have
Stanimir,
it.
I just wanted to highlight your posts that is available both on X and on Blue Sky, where you have some very beautiful charts. I know you mentioned some of the data here, but would you be so kind of to just like 2 seconds describe each of the slides before we go to the next topic?
Yeah, this is the difference between what Russia actually has as a nominal price of the bond and what they actually receive from the bond when it's sold, because they have a discount, and that discount actually results in the calculation for the yield rate for the additional bond. So in red, you can see what actually the Russian Ministry of Finance has actually earned from these debt sales.
So
And
it's a
yes.
spread, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
And here you can see the yields going down throughout the year. We started the year with over 16%, and then in Q2 we went down to a bit over 16%, and now by June and May we're seeing 15 and 14% yields for Russian debt. It's still very expensive, but it's far from what it was last year at 18% when it was becoming completely unserviceable. But again, this is far more expensive than the debt they're used to servicing. They're used to more something like 9 to 11%. It's still expensive. And this is just the same chart in form of a line.
Yeah, great. Thanks. It's a very informative post. I'm encouraged to go and check it out, and maybe give it a retweet or a repost. I'll link both of the posts in the video description after the stream.
I never tire of hearing bad economic news about Russia. It just seems to keep getting worse. Okay, so up next we have a segment I just call Stuff I Wanted to Talk About. It's just, stuff like, oh, did I disappear for a second? Just stuff in the news that is a little less, I don't know, I didn't put it in the main news. So the first one I think is a good example. There was a explosion in a gunpowder factory in Russia, and it was either the SBU or it was like a mishandling incident. It's not clear. It sounded to me like it was leaning toward mishandling incident. So yeah, there was a big Russian gunpowder factory, one of the important ones. There was a big old explosion there because it sounds like they mishandled some gunpowder. So no smoking. And then the other thing is, I already mentioned it in the news a little bit, but just like lots of trials and window falling going on in Russia. There's that really high-ranking general that was just sentenced to like 13 years in jail. And then there was like that really high-level CEO or vice president or something who fell out of a window or fell off a roof. Yeah, just in general, I don't know if we can really speak to any detail on these two particular ones. The only one maybe a little bit is the general, because he was sort of aligned. He was one of Shoigu's guys. And so it seems likely, just based on, there's like a pattern that a lot of Shoigu's guys are getting like thrown under the bus basically in the Ministry of Defense. So that's part of it. But I think in general, it could just be said that there's like a lot of failure in Russia right now. And this is like a kind of natural response of the system to start pointing fingers and, creating consequences for people, whether or not they actually are solely responsible or mainly responsible for the problems. In a lot of cases, a lot of these guys are up to stuff, but yeah, in general, it just seems to me like it's the system is, upset at all the losing going on, and it's pointing fingers. Stanimir, do you want to say anything else about the current climate in Russia right now? The CEOs and the generals kind of feeling a bit uneasy about all the pointing fingers.
They're feeling uneasy, but what we've also seen is that there's a large-scale campaign by the Prosecutor General's office of actually nationalizing assets of people who are linked to the government, people who are United Russia members, but have actually lost their cover or their power backing by someone deep within the party or deep within the power structure, the Krisha, as they say in Russia. And this week we saw Russia's large gold mining company, Yuzhuralzvoto. Its offices were raided, and they're going to seize the shares that are owned by United Russia member Konstantin Strukov, because according to them, he illegally acquired it. And he's not just a regular member, he's the deputy speaker of the local Duma in Chelyabinsk region. So it's not a random guy. It's not just a random person who got into the party to have some extra connections. He was in a senior role. But we've seen this over and over the last several months, where people who still had considerable connections within United Russia had their property seized, and we're talking here in terms of billions of euros, not hundreds of millions of rubles.
Yeah, it's a great point. The state is actively on a campaign to try to centralize or consolidate a lot of these companies, and a lot of these guys are getting caught up. And as you said, this particular one, I guess, is unprecedented in the sense that the level of loyalty this guy has shown and the level of influence he has in the ruling party, Putin's party, United Russia. Usually, that would protect someone of his stature, but in this case, no dice, because it sounds like, as you said, the system at large wants to consolidate all this stuff under state ownership.
Yeah, and for these guys, you more often see that they're actually put under arrest and then sent to jail, not so much pushed off a building. You have to do something very heinous to be pushed off a building, because usually they can put you in arrest and they can put you in CISO, which is the pretrial detention. And then in CISO, anything can happen to you. Like that's a place where suddenly cameras go out and there is no recorded footage and a person is just found dead. That's a common practice there.
Oof. Well, yeah. So lots of window falling and trials going on in Russia right now. I think that it's getting a little tense because of all the bad news. So yeah, I don't know. Hope they stop their war of aggression that is kind of ruining their society even worse than it already was. Erlend, anything you want to say about all the trials and window falling, or should we move to the next one?
I think we can move to the next one. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, the next one is China says Russia can't lose. I don't know the total details, but some Chinese ambassador said to some European ambassadors at some event, like he was speaking kind of candidly about what's going on, and he basically said, well, we're not we're not invested in Russia winning in Ukraine, but we also can't afford to let them lose, because if we let them lose, it basically creates the opportunity for the West at large to focus on China and not have all these other distractions like Russia and Iran and all this other stuff going on. So therefore, it's in China's direct interest to make sure Russia doesn't lose. They don't care if they win, but it would be bad if they lost. So yeah, I don't know, that he was speaking kind of candidly. A lot of people were like, why would he say that, and blah blah blah. But I don't know. It seems like pretty logical to me. That's what I assume their policy was. But yeah, anything, Erlend, that we should say about this beyond what's been said already?
So it wasn't just some ambassador. I think we're talking about the Chinese foreign minister telling Kaya Kallas, that is the EU's basically foreign representative or high representative, that China can't afford Russia to lose. And this is something that should break headlines everywhere. It's broken quite a few headlines, but I haven't seen political response to this, and that's of course a little bit concerning, similar to how we've been lamenting about political response to anything that is been happening in the last 3 years or 11 years, really. So this is concerning because if China wants, they can at least prolong the war. But as Stanimir has shown us in the past, they haven't really been willing to boost the Russian economy. So what will they do? That's the question. Will they just send equipment to Russia? And recently there's been a few signs of that, right? And I think we can show something that is not directly related to this, maybe, or maybe it is, right? The SBU showed pictures of one of the recently downed Shahed drones, where you can see evidence of Chinese manufacturing of this specific part. And one of the very interesting things about it is that it seems to be having a fabrication date which was just about 2 weeks before the Shahed drone was used, which implies that they have either some sort of direct airlift from the factory in China to the factory in Russia, or maybe that there is a Chinese company operating in Russia or something like that, which is, of course, both very concerning. And if this is the kind of the way that the Chinese want to help Russia continuing the war, then I think we should prepare for a lot more drones going from Russia to Ukraine in the coming future.
Yeah, and then unfortunately that brings us to my last item, which is Russia this week launched the largest aerial attack of the war that they've launched so far. It seems like that happens every 2 months or so, that they reach a new record in scale. This one, I want to say, involved over 500 aerial objects, Erlend, mostly Shaheds. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think about more than 60 missiles. So quite a considerable amount of missiles as well. That is concerning because it means Russia is still able to produce and deliver cruise missiles and ballistic missiles to Ukraine, either sea-launched, ground-launched, or air-launched.
Yep, and Ukraine's doing their best, but the scale of this is pretty bad. We talked a little bit about the U.S. pause in aid, and obviously it's bad, but the pause in aid, this is not a problem that could be solved with the existing stockpiles that were promised by the United States or anything right now that's being promised by Europe, I think, Erlend. We would need a totally new scalable solution to this problem at this point, right? There's just not enough missiles to stop all this stuff, yeah?
Yeah, and what Europe needs to do right now is to invest heavily in many different capabilities that can very quickly enhance Ukraine's air defenses. We should be very careful about saying there is one solution. There is never one solution to these kind of threats. There is a lot of people have already talked about the need of a heavily layered air defense system, and it's kind of obvious for those that are interested in it. But what we really need to see is that Europe invests both in Ukrainian systems and domestic produced systems that can help Ukraine in the short to medium term, because this threat is going to be exceedingly more difficult for Ukraine to handle, not just because of the USA disappearing partially, but also because the sheer amount of aerial targets is becoming very difficult to handle.
Yeah, the only silver lining is that Ukraine too is very busy, and they're increasing the scale of their attacks as well. But this is, I don't know. Increasingly, I think that the war might come down to this, just like this strategic war of aerial objects being hurled at each other, just because the scale just keeps getting crazier and crazier. But I don't know. It's I really hope that Ukraine can come up with systems that can defend against this type of attack, and that they're able to continue hitting like Russian facilities, because they're able to. They accomplished quite a lot this week on that front. So
there's a multifaceted solution to this problem. First, and the best solution of all, is to, as Ukraine has said many times, you need to shoot the archer, not the arrow. And that is something that Ukraine has been trying to do to the best of its capabilities. But of course, it's difficult when you don't have long-range cruise missiles or ballistic missiles that can reach further than where the Russians can launch them from, right? Or at least they do not have that in great numbers. Europe needs to do what it can to help that and make sure that Ukraine has systems that can reach where the launch capabilities are either hosted or where they actually launch from. So That is one part of the solution, and probably the most effective one. When it comes to the Shahed drones, unfortunately, I think that means you have to hit the manufacturing capabilities, which will be very, very difficult.
Yeah,
And
they've tried to hit it a couple of times, Alabuga. It seems like one time they were kind of successful, but like overall, it's not really a facility. It's not like, some gas plant or, like an electronics plant where they seem to be able to hit one thing that's real important. Anyway, in summary, they've hit it like 2 or 3 times, but as far as I can tell, not major damage.
Yeah, it's a very difficult target, right? So because that is going to be very difficult to achieve, we need to make sure that all different kinds of layers of the Ukrainian air defenses are strengthened. That means radar capabilities. It means the mobile fire groups. Give them better equipment so that they can more easily shoot down and detect the drones. Put money into the various different programs that Ukraine are developing when it comes to interceptor drones. And Germany has done something. I'm sure there is lots of ways to enhance those capabilities, both with technology provided by the West and also with funds, because again, funds is always one of the limiting factors for Ukraine's domestic weapons development. So yeah, this is a big problem, and it's as you can see from the stats from the account, the Shahed tracker, which I think is very interesting. The the amount of Shahed drones launched at Ukraine is just absolutely insane, and we need to remember that even though some of them hit targets and damage, kill people, one of the most the most detrimental effect it has on the war for Ukraine is that they need to expend munitions to take those aerial threats down. Because even if it's horrible to say, when a Shahed drone hits a apartment building or a kindergarten or a sports facility or whatever it hits, it doesn't really have much effect on Ukraine's warfighting capabilities. But when it drains their air defenses, it does, because that means there are less air defenses available to protect strategic and operational targets. So this is it's kind of cruel to say, but the war, the terror war that Russia is waging on civilians is not really Ukraine's biggest problem when it comes to the war in itself.
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine faces a really difficult choice. I don't think any country has dealt with a problem of this scale before in the air. And they've had to come up with very unique solutions to the problems, and they're doing their best. But they're making it up as they go, essentially, and we should all be looking to their example, because this is the reality of what modern conflict looks like, as far as I can tell, right?
Yeah, of course. Another thing which is could be even more effective than just giving munitions to Ukraine or money, so that they can develop their own air defense systems, is of course if the West would be, or Europe would be, willing to send our air defenses into certain parts of Ukraine that are considered more or less safe, or at least far away from the active front lines, and fighter aircraft to shoot down incoming targets, similar to what a lot of Western countries does whenever there is a missile or drone barrage going from Iran or Iranian assets towards Israel. This has been going on for quite a while, that Western air forces come flying around Israeli airspace and shooting down targets coming towards Israel. So we have demonstrated that we have this capability, and it's been extremely successful. If Western air forces would take off some of the pressure from Western parts of Ukraine, that would, of course, give you, it would be a multiplying factor in a sense, because you would move in lots of different assets, also when it comes to air surveillance and radars, etc. That would boost the already existing air defense in Ukraine. And I think it is kind of ridiculous to think of this as such a hard thing to do, because it isn't. And I don't think Russia would have any real response. They would be screaming into the void about escalation and NATO this, NATO that, Third World War, nuclear threats. But I find it very hard to believe that they would actually do something, because there is no aggression towards Russia defending Ukrainian cities from drone attacks.
Yeah, I agree. I think the rationale is pretty straightforward, right? Like, you're Poland, you have millions of Ukrainian refugees that Russia has thrown in your lap to deal with, and you would rather have them back in Ukraine. So you say, but of course they don't want to get bombed, so they don't want to go back right now. So you say, we're setting up a zone where they can go so that we don't have to have, host a refugee problem in our country indefinitely. Like, that's not, no reasonable country should be expected to do that. And the fact that Russia's just left them in that position and told them to deal with it is not their problem. And fine, if they're told to deal with it, they can deal with it that way, right? So that would be my justification if we were to do that. Doesn't seem that crazy to me. But yeah, as you said, it's there's too many people worried about escalation with Russia. Obviously, right now the U.S. has no interest in doing this. All that stuff you said. The alternative, of course, is hoarding everything like a goblin, so that Ukraine doesn't have anything because you're worried about yourself or something. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's a huge problem. Obviously, all countries should be helping Ukraine right now, because Ukraine will be sharing very important lessons going forward about what all this stuff, how to deal with this. So yeah, Erlend, you saw a tweet this week, Erlend.
Yeah, I saw this tweet.
About it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of important that we sometimes debunk something. Maybe not all the time. We're not here just for debunking. It would be a forever task. But unfortunately, there are some posts that contain bad information that get a lot of attention. This post in particular has 2.1 million views, more than 2,400 retweets. And unfortunately, it contains, at least the first post and some of the information in the rest of the thread as well, contains either misunderstood information or just plainly misinformation. And unfortunately, in this case, very much so to a negative effect for Ukraine, because it is. So what the post is claiming is that Ukraine is the first country to stop 400 plus Shahed drones per night using interceptor drones. And it says the source is the Telegraph. I haven't read the full article because it's blocked by a paywall. But it doesn't matter, because this is just wrong. And the first way we can debunk this is because if we look at the data from the official the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine about how many Shahed drones that are tracked per night or per day, they claim that around the maximum amount of drones that they have destroyed, meaning with all different kinds of air defense assets, that being fighter jets, air mobile groups, ground-to-air missiles, and interceptor drones on top of that, and maybe even other means, are less than 300 at the absolute maximum. But mostly, on the hottest days, it lies around 200. This is just the first clue to the fact that there is no way that Ukraine would be able to destroy 400 plus Shahed drones per night. using interceptor drones. This would have been great, and certainly Ukraine is working really hard towards enhancing their interceptor drone program so that they can take down more Shahed drones with them. But from the official sources that have been talking about this, or the news that have been written about this from Ukrainian sources, this is still very much in the developing phases. On top of that, they show the video of a drone which is not a Shahed drone being intercepted. It's a Gerbera drone, which is one of those what Artem likes to call fake drones. It's just it's an inert, or at maximum with a very small warhead drone that is just made to overflow the Ukrainian air defenses with targets in the skies.
Yeah, for people who don't know, we have a researcher, Artem at Tochnyi, who this is like all he studies all day. And so he would know if this was true. And it's obviously
not. I mean, you can even see it like in the video. It doesn't look like a Shahed drone.
Yeah, it's not a Shahed for sure.
It's a Gerbera, and you know, it's misleading. And the thing is, and the reason why I bring it up is because from this post alone, if you would interpret this, it seems like Ukraine actually doesn't have a problem intercepting Shahed drones, right? But they do. So why would want this message to get out is beyond me, because it really is negative for Ukraine on a PR level. So that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Well, thank you, Erlend. Yeah, I think it's it's always important to make sure that information is accurate, regardless of like what side it's coming from. And in this case, there's no publicly available information that Ukraine has shot 100 drones down in a single night with interceptor drones, let alone 400. So it's pretty blatant. 2 million views, tens of thousands of likes. It is what it is, man. But we do our best to stay accurate about things. We would love if it were true, but it's just not. Yeah. So up next, we have your questions. You guys always have good questions for us. So I guess the first question is...
I see a lot of chat, but I didn't see any direct questions for us.
Yeah. Sometimes I just try to turn them into questions, but I'm not having a lot of luck today.
I don't think we...
So the first one is the North Korea stuff. Yeah, one girl's just saying, like, talking about this North Korean troops. Yeah, North Korea has mentioned that they're talking about sending more troops. Honestly, they probably are. Like, usually when North Korea starts talking about doing stuff, they usually have done it, like, in terms of precedent. So I wouldn't be surprised. The big, like, change here, or the big development here would be if they actually went into Ukraine to fight, right? Because right now, so far, the line that they've set for themselves is that they'll hang out in Russia and do stuff, right? And when Ukraine was in Kursk, they could fight because, Ukraine was in Russia. But now it's a question of whether or not they'll just stay in the back lines and maybe, like, take over some spots so that the Russian army is a bit more freed up, or if they'll actually send them into occupied Ukraine to fight, which would be like a new development. So yeah, don't know, but they've definitely talked about it. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. Usually the stuff that North Korea talks about publicly when it comes to commitments to Russia, they wind up doing, because it's a dictatorship run by like one guy. So when he says he wants to do something, usually it gets done. And yeah, anything you want to say about North Korean troops, Erlend?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard like it's mainly logistics and engineering troops, but the number 30,000 makes me believe that that is not true, and that they will have at least some sort of combat troops. One of the things that Russia would need is heavy artillery, and if North Korea would send in their own artillery brigades or battalions and operate in the rear, trying to avoid capture or being caught on Mavic videos, that could be one of those solutions that they are looking at to enhance Russia's warfighting capabilities with North Korean soldiers. I think they're going to try and do something that is less obvious than the last time, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. Stanimir, I know last week you mentioned that the Russians are definitely trying to import more labor from North Korea. Any news on that?
No, it's just that the same announcement still states that they have only around 16,000 North Korean construction workers, and they want to triple it to over 50,000.
Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, that's that. The other kind of related topic is Laos. So someone said, and now Laotians from Laos as mercenaries. So allegedly, the Russians have like companies that do this all over the place. They go to like India and like Nepal and other places, and they like recruit people as mercenaries. Sometimes they just recruit them as like they say they're going to drive a taxi, and then they get there and they're like, "Guess what? You're going to basic training, or you're not even doing that. You're just going right to the front line." So there's been a lot of Russian private groups that do that kind of in the shadows. But apparently the Russians are like asking the actual Laotian military to come and do like a similar role that the North Koreans did, where they come do like, engineering stuff. Obviously the Russians would love that. I think Putin has really made a strong effort to try to get other countries to sign on to the invasion in some form because it helps legitimize it. It makes it look less like he's alone in the world doing this crazy thing and more like he's, on one side of an issue and then there's another side of an issue, something like that, right? If he has allies, even if it's like North Korea and Laos, it's still like some countries over here and some countries over there. So then countries who would rather not deal with it can stand in the middle and go, well, this is just two sides and we don't want to get involved, right? So that's the goal, I would say, of Russia when they try to do things like this. It definitely remains to be seen. I would say it's probably unlikely that Laos will get involved just because, as Stanimir has pointed out many times, Russia doesn't have a lot of money to be throwing around to like get countries to sign on. And I don't think like North Korea has some tangible things they can gain from Russia by participating. Russia has technology that they're very interested in. And I don't know, most of the other countries in the world don't really need like outdated Cold War technology. Like Iran and North Korea like could really use that right now. That's a real shot in the arm for them. But other countries have better sources for technology and things like that. So I think the chances of Laos like risking it and just doing it are pretty low. But crazier things have happened in the world. Erlend, anything you want to say about the Laotians?
Not necessarily about the Laotians, but I think this is just one more sign that that Russia and Putin is trying to some way, reach back towards the time of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, where there was, a bunch of countries which they could lean on, even if they were not that important when it comes to global power and economy. But at least they had some block, right? And could claim some sort of justification just because they had these people on their side.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, when you go talk to countries like Laos seriously, then that's what you're doing, probably. No offense to Laos. Go ahead, Sam.
Also, you have to remember that it's a bit funny on the Russian side because when Russian male bloggers are criticizing the Russian army, they usually call it the Laotian army. Sure.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think that was it. I don't see any more questions, really.
Can I add something to the previous topics?
Yes.
On the gunpowder plant explosion? What I've seen in Russia is that in some factories they don't pay them very well. So something like 42 to 46,000 rubles per month for a gunpowder mixer. I wouldn't do that for less than 100,000, but that's what they're paying.
Oof, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that traditionally, like historically, gunpowder manufacturing plant is a very high risk operation, and there's been a lot of accidents, you know, through the years. That's why traditionally you place even as early as in the 1600s, you always placed your gunpowder storage and manufacturing outside the city walls, somewhere where it couldn't really damage stuff too much if it went up in the air. So yeah, wouldn't be surprised if Russia had actual accidents and not just sabotage, because these things even still happen in other countries as well, right? So
you're saying I should put out the cigarette?
yeah, I don't think there, even static electricity can do some damage. So
Yeah, it's true. Safety first, folks. But someone mentioned that did they see a storm shadow on an Su-24? So just on that topic, I know that a storm shadow was used, or we think it's very likely a storm shadow was used to hit that base in Crimea where that general was hit. And I kind of underplayed it in the report, but it was like pretty serious. They got that general, they got a bunch of officers. They hit it twice, I think. And yeah, it was like pretty bad for Russia, that strike. It's one of the more significant strikes that Ukraine has done with a missile in the past couple months. But Erlend, do you know anything about this? Did they put it on an Su-24, or have we seen anything like that?
I have not studied this specific question, so I don't know.
I don't know. We'll ask the aviation guys if they've seen anything, but they didn't say anything in like our aviation thing. And null reports not always the most reliable. Not saying they're wrong all the time, but if it was just null reports, like then I don't know, probably not. But yeah, we'll look into it. If we find anything, we'll correct ourselves. But we're not aware of anything. Definitely, they used a storm shadow though recently, or I shouldn't say definitely, but we think they used a storm shadow recently in one of the strikes.
They used several.
But,
It
yeah,
seems like
several.
they used several. Yeah, from the
That
signature of the warhead, and also some of the videos that contain sound of the turbofan. It's without me going very in depth. It sounded like it. So wouldn't be surprised if it was Storm Shadow or Scout PG.
Yeah, I guess maybe one last topic before we close out, Erlend's kind of a comment, but we've talked about it a little bit. So the EU spent shift from 2% to 5%. This is something that at the last NATO summit, the head of NATO, I don't know, I always miss the details of these things, but someone said that we're going to meet that 5% target. The Europeans, I'll say that the Europeans seem to be trying to meet that 5% target, or nominally saying that they're going to try. But we've seen a lot of countries now coming out with like budgets for what that means. And a lot of it looks like creative accounting to like put bridges as like essential military spending and things like that. So I don't know. Anything we want to say about Europe's effort to get to that 5%?
So it's kind of important to say that, to note that the most important part of this is the spending goal is the 3.5, which is supposed to be spent on actual heavy metal or hardware. So on the actual defense capabilities, military capabilities, and weaponry, etc. So those 3.5% is the most important part. Not saying that the 1.5% additionally that is included in this target, which is supposed to be used on kind of resilience measures, so and strengthening signals capabilities for the civilian sphere, and logistics capabilities, so that being building roads or strengthening roads, bridges, railways, whatever, making sure that ports are up to the standard so that they can receive supplies, and all these kinds of things. I'm not saying that's not important, but I think that was where it seems very likely this was added just to please Mr. Trump, because he doesn't really like to read long documents, and he sees a big number and he's happy, right? But the 3.5 is a lot more important. What concerns me is that some nations that have never met the 2% goal, right, will conceal their unwillingness to reach the 3.5 by some crazy accounting where they, for instance, Italy, there is a proposal now to revive this half a century long proposal to build a bridge between Italy's mainland and Sicily, and then they inflate that uh, that number by, I don't know, was it 16 billion euros or something? First of all, the funny thing, that bridge will never be built. It's about Italy, right? They will never build that bridge, and if they start, they will just flood the money into local corruption and mafiosos. So, and this is not something I say negatively about Italy as a whole. Like, I love Italy. I have a long relationship with Italy, but if you just look into how infrastructure has unfortunately for the locals that live there, infrastructure projects have failed to actually materialize in the south. It these kind of things is kind of the worry that I have. I'm When it comes to my own country, I'm pretty positive about it because we need a lot of infrastructure upgrades related to logistics, especially in the north. So hopefully that will actually happen. We'll see maybe a railway between, so extending the railway in the north is kind of important, and also possibly some of the landing strips that are being used dual purpose, civilian and militarily. So these kind of things could be important for some countries, but I'm concerned about other countries concealing behind them.
Yep, we can only hope that all the countries in the European community are spending in good faith to get that figure up to that coveted 3.5 or 5%. Because, yeah, it's very important right now. Obviously, I'm hoping the United States gets more actively involved in what's going on because it's very important to global security, in my estimation. But the reality is right now that Europe really needs to take care of its own security situation quickly, and I wish them the best of luck, man.
Yeah, and another concern about this is that Spain first said, like, no, we're not going to take part of this, and then some behind the scenes things were happening, and apparently they got some sort of concession from the general secretary where they say that they will meet their capability targets, but they will not spend the 3.5 or the 5%. They are still going to be maybe hovering around less than 2% and claiming that they will anyhow meet the capability targets. That is a precedent that is pretty bad to set. Maybe we shouldn't talk about it too much. Maybe some people will get bad ideas. Hopefully that will not apply to the others, because there are a lot of countries that need to spend. And a very good sign recently is the leaks about the possible German big spending, more than 1,000 battle tanks or main battle tanks, and some numbers of armored vehicles exceeding more than 2,500. That's where the Boxer modularity may be actually useful when you have a substantial fleet. Still wish it was a different vehicle than the Boxer, but something is better than nothing. And in this case, if they get anywhere close to the numbers that has been leaked, it's a very good thing for European defense, good for manufacturing in Europe as well. In my idea, a very smart move by Germany, which has some sort of a car manufacturing crisis, to then invest heavily in military industry is probably a very good move for their economy. And I hope that we will see other countries do the same. Great Britain, for instance, they do a lot of good things, but seems like the wallet is kind of short. So hopefully they'll do something similar to what the Germans have done, where they basically said we can take up as many loans as we want to fund the military and the military industrial capabilities. And I think the UK would have. It wouldn't be bad for the UK economy if they did the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think, obviously money's tight in the UK right now. They've had budgetary problems for a long time, but I agree there's ways to do this that won't completely, won't involve just money going out of your pocket. You can make this part of a way to revitalize certain industries and make it at least not hurt as bad financially as, being taken over by a hostile foreign power, for example.
Maybe the UK needs a BBB, a big beautiful bill, and take up some more state debt like the US is doing right now. Yeah,
maybe. No comment. Stanimir, I wanted to ask you one more thing before we go. That is, you're someone who's been following this. That's why I wanted to ask you that there's a little bit of a spat. I'm going to call it a spat between Azerbaijan and Russia right now. Russia accidentally shot down a passenger aircraft that belonged to Azerbaijan. Is that correct? And there's been some very tense diplomatic exchanges, but I don't think anything serious has happened policy-wise yet, has it?
Policy-wise, no, but they've started doing tits for tat. So Azerbaijan arrested random people who were Russians living in Azerbaijan, called them drug dealers, even though we know they're IT workers, some of them. We've identified them. And it all started from the recent part of the spat started because the investigative committee decided to arrest part of the Azeri diaspora in Yekaterinburg, and they called up the Rose Guard because the SWAT teams are part of the Rose Guard. They called up the local police. They arrested over 50 people, released most of them, beat to death 2 people during the arrest, even before getting into pretrial detention. And that spread like wildfire in the Azeri diaspora when the people were released, when they learned that 2 people were basically beaten and tortured to death to get confessions. Supposedly, it's linked to crimes in the 2000s and murders in the 2000s in Russia, which they're now reinvestigating. And then Azerbaijan just ended all of the diplomatic missions and diplomatic overtures they were going to do with Russia during the last few days of June and now in July, and it started arresting Russians in Azerbaijan. It first started by arresting the bureau chiefs of Sputnik in Azerbaijan, claiming they're FSB agents, and then it started arresting random Russians and also one Russian journalist which was filming the arrests of the people from Sputnik. So both of them are now just moving into a phase where they're randomly arresting people and trying to find crimes to pin on them. The issue is that probably Putin doesn't want this, but he hasn't really given clear advice or clear instructions on how to deal with this. And also on the other side, there is a large Azeri diaspora, which is in Russia, which is close to 500,000, maybe 600,000 people. These are those that hold the Russian passport and are also from the Azeri ethnicity. And it's becoming a volatile situation between the 2 countries right now.
Yeah, and on top of that, to add into the mix, right? Russia and Azerbaijan have this sort of deal right now where Russia is selling Azerbaijan gas. Azerbaijan is slapping a label "Made in Azerbaijan" on the gas, and then Europe says, "Oh, Azerbaijani gas," and buys it. So far, this hasn't touched that deal. None of this bad blood between them has touched that deal, but we're kind of looking at this going, "Whoa, if this gets really bad, this could be pretty serious for the Russian gas market," right?
Well, it's not a big gas deal, and also it's more that Azerbaijan is selling more of its own gas and buying Russian gas on the cheap to replace its domestic supply. But yes, it's a way of whitewashing Russian gas. But I think it's around a few billion cubic meters per year or something like that. I don't think it's a big amount, but Russia is sitting on over 60 billion cubic meters of gas that it can't export. So anything it can export, that's a good thing for them. The bigger issue would be vegetables and fruits, because the Russian harvest is hit bad because of the bad weather. And their usual go-to points for buying fruits and vegetables are Azerbaijan, Turkey, Serbia, Moldova. And now Turkey and Azerbaijan might be a closed market for them because of this, which means Russian food prices are going to spike more than usual, because usually they have to rely on this additional source of goods.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, Turkey and Azerbaijan are pals. So this is, yeah, going to affect Russia's relationship with Turkey also. So yeah, I think that all good points in terms of the current situation between Russia and Azerbaijan. Stanimir, yeah, any last thoughts on that before we close out?
No, but I want to point out something that's becoming more of a thing in Russia, which
Sure.
is Russian air transport has been disrupted significantly this weekend, with tens of thousands of Russians stuck at airports. And this is becoming more and more of a thing, because when there are Ukrainian drones attacking Russian sites, they close down the airports, they shut down mobile internet, and they just strand people. And so from here on out, it's going to be even more difficult to travel within Western and Southern Russia by plane.
Yeah, definitely getting weekly reports about major disruptions at airports, and it sounds like it's getting pretty bad. So it's good news for Ukraine. Cool. Well, thanks guys. Thanks to our panel for coming this week and sharing all that fascinating information about what's going on with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Thank you to our live chat for asking all the great questions you guys ask. We always appreciate your feedback, and we like to know what you guys want to know about what's going on. So thanks for coming and participating and watching and liking and subscribing and all that great stuff. You can always check out our website also, Tochnyi.info. It's a great place for interactive maps and things like that. And of course, thank you to everyone who tunes in after the broadcast is over live. And watches the video on demand. We appreciate you guys too. We know that not everyone can make it live. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see everyone next Sunday, like we do every Sunday at 2100 Kyiv time. Slava Ukraini.
Slava.
On behalf of the brave.